Go ahead, Carissa.
Okay, so hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Gerbel. Social, I'm also,
Oh, you're cutting out a bit, Carissa.
oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's
I
better.
feel like my face has to be like flush against the screen for the volume to pick me up.
Oh, that's okay.
Um, so I'm also an EDI consultant in my spare time as well. So today's workshop, we're going to be talking about how we can kind of encourage an ethnocultural lens with children and youth. A little bit about me. I've been working in the field of community development for over 10 years now. I started off as a counselor for pregnant and parenting youth and a program facilitator as well for healthy parenting techniques and whatnot. I'm also a mother myself. My son is a 14. Um, and what else about me? So I was born and raised in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And I lived in Toronto for about 8 years. And I've been in Calgary. It will be 6 years coming up in August that I've been in Calgary for 6 years. So welcome, everybody. I also go by pronouns she and her. And I will share my screen now and we'll jump into presentation. All right, can everybody see?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'd like to start today off with a land acknowledgement. So, all my relations, I'm humbled to be living on Treaty 7 land. I'm humbled to be a settler on this land. I honor and respect the first peoples of this land. Mohkinstsis, Calgary is home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda, and the Métis Nation, Region 3. Treaty 7 is also home to all other First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, where we all work, live, and play. So I want to just go through a couple accountable space guidelines today, and I encourage group discussion. This is a safe space where we can share. We're all in a place of learning. So a couple things to kind of keep in mind. So please share the space. Speak for yourself using I language. Examine your own privilege, so be aware of any potential power dynamics. Understand that individuals experience racism in different ways. Recognizing that we're all in a place of learning, so it's really important to listen and be open to calling in harmful attitudes as well as being open to critical self-reflection. It's important to take care of yourself and plan a debrief if something comes up. And it's really important to keep the stories and share the lessons. And I love this quote by Robin DiAngelo, the author of White Fragility. The key to moving forward is what we do with our discomfort. We can use it as a door out, blame the messenger, and disregard the message. Or we can use it as a door in by asking, why does this unsettle me? And what would it mean for me if this were true? So we'll jump right into it. A lot of the times when again, the last couple of years, I've really kind of highlighted a lot of different things in regards to like racial tensions in the world. And I think too, just how technology is advancing and the fact that we're able to, have video recorders at our fingertips, and a lot of information is getting shared online really quickly. And then we're kind of faced with this dilemma around, hey, like if we haven't had these conversations with our kids about what they're seeing through these screens about racism and differences in the world, how do we now have those conversations? A lot of times parents might think that their child is too young to talk about race and differences in the world. Or they think that talking about race encourages racial bias. And often people will say, well, we don't see color. And I want to kind of talk about that a little bit because the phrase, I don't see color, as well-meaning as this may be, it invalidates individuals, especially people of color's individuals' lived experiences, and it actually denies their lived experiences. And as much as we would love to live in a world where folks don't see color and treat everybody the same, it's just not the reality of the world that we live in. People do see color. We can't walk into spaces without noticing differences in color. So it's not fair to say that we just don't see it, because then we're denying the reality of what people of color face. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay. So talking about race and racial tensions will be traumatizing to my child. This is another common thought that a lot of people think. So, and again, a lot of the times it's just discomfort about having the conversation because they don't feel like they're an expert. So they don't know where to start. So today's presentation, I'm hoping to give you some tips and tools to kind of encourage having these conversations with your children. So why it's important to start conversations early. So by 6 months of age, babies are noticing racial differences. And by age 4, children have begun to show signs of racial bias. It's important to let your child know that it's perfectly okay to notice skin color and to talk about race. Start talking about what racial differences mean and what they don't mean. So it's really interesting to kind of think about babies at the age of 6 months kind of noticing differences. And really, this is just like, again, the world around them, the toys they play with, the images they see on TV, the people that are in their close bubble. They'll notice who looks the same and then who stands out and who's different, right? So then again, if your children are only kind of seeing one race of folks, then they might be a little bit scared if they're introduced to folks that look a little bit different from them, type of thing. And that's what that means around like 6 months of age. And then, so I want to kind of touch on the age range of 2 to 3. So between 2 and 3, we know that kids become way more vocal. So they start talking, and it's normal for them to spontaneously talk about color at this age. It's important to, again, if your child's, in public, I know this happens all the time. I can share a funny story of a colleague of mine when I first moved to the city, actually. So one of my colleagues at my former job was letting me know that she was at church with her daughter, and I think her daughter was about 4 at the time. And they had a new member at the church congregation, and this woman was Black, and her daughter had never seen a Black woman before. And to my former colleagues, she just didn't even realize that her daughter had never seen a person of color before. So it really wasn't until this incident happened that she was like, "Oh, mom, like her skin is dirty, right? Like, or she has mud on her skin." And then my colleague was taking a gasp because she's like, "Wow, like, what do I say right now? Because we're in public, we're in a church setting, and my daughter is yelling that this woman has mud on her skin. How do I diffuse the situation?" And this is a really common situation that can happen, right? And it's really important to kind of reassure in a positive tone. Hey, yes, she does have darker skin, but it's just not the same of yours. It's also a really nice color. And just kind of reassuring them, like, you know what, folks are different. Like, not everybody looks like you, right? People look different. People have Black, brown, and different color skin tones, and that's okay, right? And again, it's really easy to kind of like mimic this and point these things out when you're playing with your child. So for instance, if you have different toys that have different dresses or shoes or hats or skin tones, kind of pointing out as your child is kind of saying, hey, this toy has this brown, this color hat. And then saying, hey, yes, this toy looks different from this one, and that's okay. And that's kind of how we start normalizing differences through play with our child at an early age. And letting your child know that it's perfectly okay to notice skin color and talk about race and start talking about what racial differences mean and what they don't mean. It's really important as well to encourage your child to ask questions, share observations and experiences, and respectively be curious about race. You can also expose your child to different cultural opportunities, so photographs, films, books, and cultural events, for example, and discuss the experience afterwards. You don't have to be an expert on race to talk to your child about race. So be honest about what you don't know and work with your child to find accurate information. So when we look at children's development from ages 4 to 6, it's common for children to assign positive traits to folks of their own ethnic group at this age. As a result, you might have, again, the incident that happened to my colleague at the church, right? Where they all think that different color skin is dirty or not clean, or that she had mud on her skin because it's different and it's innocent, right? And they're just not aware because they just haven't seen it. So I think the great thing about living in 2021 is that we've done so much work to have ethnocultural movies and books and toys and chapters as full of different types of Indigenous books about Black history, Asian history, and it's great because we can actually now give our children a book collection that has experiences of people from around the world. I remember when I was growing up in the 90s that it was really rare to find different cultural books and toys, and things pretty much always look the same. So it was really difficult for me to, for instance, to find like Black dolls and Black books and whatnot growing up. And even with my son growing up, it was also kind of challenging to find those books. You really had to kind of go out of your way to find them. And I want to just kind of share a quick story with you guys, just to kind of frame this a little bit. And what that means for folks, when we grow up in a world where things don't necessarily reflect us, right? People of color. So when I was growing up in Ottawa, Ontario, I was probably one of the only Black kids in my school. And I definitely heard a lot of the different comments, racist comments from kids and stuff growing up, because again, I was different and it was the easiest thing for them to poke fun of was my differences. And I remember, wanting to have different hair and wanting to be white when I was a kid, because that's all I saw around me. I didn't see things that looked like me, and everything that was good essentially was the complete opposite of me. And now when I was raising my son, I was like, hey, you know what? We live in such a multicultural community. He's going to school with all kinds of different races. He has teachers that, are different races. This was in Brampton, Ontario. And I didn't think that he would have the same feelings that I did growing up, where there weren't that many kids that looked like me at all. But then one day he came home, and he had to have been about 3 years old at the time. And he said to me that he wished his name was Matthew and that he was white and had like blonde curly hair. And I was shocked at that comment, because I'm like, hey, what? Like, I understand that I wanted to be white, or, identified with that as a kid because that's all I saw around me. But, why is he feeling that way? Like, he has all these, multiracial peers and teachers. And I was really confused as to why he was still internalizing those beliefs. And then I started looking at, so for those of you who have boys, I know the boys kind of go through this transition where they're obsessed with like Thomas the Train for a bit and like Elmo, and then they kind of like graduate to like action figures and like Spider-Man and superheroes and stuff like that, right? So he was getting into Spider-Man and Superman and Batman, and the Avengers characters, so Captain America and all these different characters. And then I realized that all these little superheroes that he was starting to look up to, none of them looked like him. And because he was the kid that would come home and put on his cape and put on his costume and run around the house, and he just really lived and breathed that whole superhero thing. And I realized that the role models that he was looking up to and the toys and characters that he was seeing in his books and beloved movies, they didn't represent him. And I guess, again, he internalized that as, well, I guess I can't be this mighty superhero that's like saving the world because it's not an accurate picture of me. So I just wanted to kind of give you that example. And the fact that we actually have the opportunity where we can really diversify our children's toys. And then you can, in active play, point out differences in toys and normalize them for your child. So when they go out into the world, it's not such a shock, because at home they're used to seeing those differences. So it's really important for us to be mindful. What kids hear from us is less important from what they see us do. So remembering that you're a role model for your child, and what you say is important, but what you do in the diversity of your friendship circle, for instance, is how will have a bigger impact on your kids. If your child doesn't attend a diverse school, consider enrolling them in after-school programs or weekend activities like sports leagues that are diverse, if you're able to. Not everyone's able to do that, but if you're able to, that would be great. And if you can't, then choosing books and toys that include persons of different races and ethnicities are really important. And then also visit museums and exhibits that are about different cultures and religions. And I know Calgary is pretty good at having multicultural festivals and whatnot in the summer. So it's great to always kind of take a look at those and kind of submerge your kids into various cultures and kind of unpacking what that means. So again, when we talk about kids from age 7 to 8 now, racial attitudes tend to improve around this age, and kids are pretty receptive as to who's different from them and whatnot. So example, if your child comes home and says, hey, like so and so's hair texture is different from mine, then it's important for parents for us to say, yes, so and so's hair texture is different from yours, but it's still quite interesting, isn't it? And also, don't you guys both like baseball or soccer or dance or ballet? And then finding those commonalities. So it's important to, yes, acknowledge that this person has different hair, but hey, don't you guys both like butterflies or dance or art? Or where do you guys relate on a common ground where you both have the same interests? So yes, we see differences, but then we're also seeing that balance as to, but they also like the same things as me, right? So then we're not just focusing on differences. And kids are more likely to be exposed to racial injustices and stereotypes by this age. So it's critical to really kind of dispel those cultural myths and really avoid making those generalizations, right? And unfortunately, again, working with kids, children, and youth, like we see this happen all the time, right? And again, with parents modeling the example for their children, because a lot of times we'll see kids come to school and say things that they may have overheard their parents having conversation with, or whatnot as well, right? So we want to make sure that we're being really mindful of the types of conversations we're having about race in front of our kids, because our kids really do adopt those ideologies and behaviors as well. Now, I'm not sure if you guys have ever taken an implicit bias test. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for 1 second because I want to send a link here in the Teams. So, has anyone taken an implicit bias test before? Yes, Erin has. Okay. Oh, I don't think I actually can message in the chat. Do you guys have a setting on that?
Oh, really? You can?
I think so. 1 second here.
There should be like a chat bubble at the top. Did you open it and it's not letting you type?
Yeah, it's not letting me put anything
Let
in
me
there.
check. It says it's enabled. So that's really weird.
Yeah, and I can't click it for it to. Okay, well, what I could do is I could send it to you guys through email, and then if you want to share it after, you guys can, or I'll just add it to the resource link page.
Okay.
So yeah, implicit bias tests are really great because they show us what our inherent biases are. And what I really love about working with kids is that they're so honest about their experiences. And as they get older, they're more and more aware of how negative stereotypes kind of affect how they view the world and whatnot. And by ages 7 or 8, it's really important to be able to have those conversations with your kids, and even sharing, like, so as an adult as well. If you move on and do the implicit bias test and then you see where you're inherently biased, it's important to kind of be aware of that and then work through it. And even if you want to share that with your child as well, hey, you know what? I tend to have a bias because of, where I grew up. And I never really was exposed to folks of different cultures and backgrounds. So all I really had to go off was what I saw in the media. But now I know that that was wrong. And this is how I'm kind of working towards dispelling some of those biases and myths, right? So it's important for us to be honest with their kids, because really they're really just learning from us as well as we go along. And family history is really important as well. So if we can talk about the histories and experiences of our own racial and ethnic cultural groups, we can kind of relate that to other cultures' experiences with racism as well, right? And then we can tell stories about our family's immigration, or aunts or uncles, or anyone that you had, or any challenges really and truly that you had to overcome, and how it can kind of relate to people that are, feeling more marginalized in society. So, and then noticing that our children are amazing at noticing patterns, including racial patterns. So who lives in their neighborhood versus their friends. So you help them make sense of those patterns and kind of do that exploring. So moving on from kids that are 7 to 8, we go to like 8 to 12, for instance, now. So I've done a lot of presentations with kids in elementary school classes. So grade 7 and 8, 6, 7, and 8. And they're really honest and open about what they experience. And a lot of youth will tell me, you know what, I would be afraid if I was walking home by myself and I saw a group of like Black teenagers in the corner of the street. And then I'm like, oh, really? I'm like, okay, so why are you nervous or scared about that? And they'll say, well, it's the movies that I've seen on TV, right? It's like that's what my image is of Black people or Black men. And then so essentially we're seeing that the media is really kind of, perpetuating this fear that Black folks are dangerous. And it's important to have that open dialogue with your kids. And yeah, so that's why I really love talking to kids about this stuff, because their eyes are really open and they really know what's happening. And I think as parents, it's really easy for us to kind of want to go into protection mode, like, oh, our kids don't need to know this. Like, it's not, we want to protect them from society or whatnot. But our kids are already seeing and viewing these things. And especially with the increasing access to social media, especially our kids that are above 8, from like 9 to 12, 13, these kids are on social media. Facebook's kind of irrelevant for that age, but they're on TikTok, they're on Instagram, quite predominantly. And we all know that there's lots of like things that just aren't true, right? So dramatizations on social media. And unfortunately, our kids have a really hard time deciphering what's true and what's fake. So it's important for us to be able to explain those things when they come up and really kind of talk about discrimination, racism, and how it's really a plague in our society. So it's really important also to know the correct history of settlers from around the world. And there's multiple resources available to encourage those discussions with your kids. And the biggest one that I can think of is Indigenous peoples in Canada. Growing up, there's just so many myths and just wrong information about our Indigenous peoples. And just kind of quite blatantly a lack of respect for Indigenous peoples. I remember hearing a lot of negative things about those communities growing up, and even moving here to Calgary, a lot of really, really harmful things that really kind of perpetuate this stereotype of Indigenous people that's just wrong, without painting the whole picture. And Canada has a really rich history when it comes to systemic racism with Indigenous folks. So it's important to kind of work through some of that stuff with your kids as well, especially if you hear them coming home, because at this age, between like 7 to 12, they're going to start coming home with some stories and just things that they're going to hear their friends saying, or that they'll pick up from, social media and stuff like that. So it's important to have those conversations, and if you have to research it with them and get the correct history and find that, then that's great, because it will be a learning opportunity for you guys as well. Okay, so being an active listener and an advocate. So helping your child to understand what it means to be and how to be a change agent. So when I say change agent, I'm really kind of just talking about allyship. So how many of you guys have heard about allyship before? You could just unmute, and because I can't see the Teams call right now.
I have.
Looks like most people have.
Most people have heard about allyship. So can you guys talk to me a little bit about what that means to you?
If you prefer to type it in the chat as well, I can read it out.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
While folks are thinking, to me, allyship is about like standing with people and understanding their experiences.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I say change agent, it really just means an ally. So we can teach your children to be an ally by standing up for folks when, like, so essentially on the playground or whatnot, if their friends being made fun of because of the color of their skin. You let them know that it's not okay to just stand by and let them be made fun of. Let them know that they should stand up and say, hey, you know what, that's not okay. And that's as simple as it has to be. And I know, like, again, doing these presentations for years, like a lot of folks, even for instance, a simple scenario around a racist joke. You're at a party and someone tells a racist joke. So now I'm talking about adults and how we frame that. So most folks would be uncomfortable if they're at a party and one of their friends or one of their acquaintances said a racist joke to the room. So it would make you immediately feel uncomfortable for the most part. But then most folks wouldn't really say anything. And the reason why they wouldn't say anything is because they typically just don't know what to say. And that's fine. That's a pretty common response to that, right? But it's better to say something than to not say anything at all. And this is what we want to teach our kids. And this is how we move forward to be a change agent, that this type of behavior is not okay. And we want our kids to be better than we are, right? So whenever possible, connect the conversations you're having to change. So how can we change our kids to have more of an anti-racist lens, or to be more equitable, or to be just more inclusive in their thinking and way of life, right? So having the ethnocultural lens around, hey, I see and acknowledge differences, right? But I'm going to support those differences and I'm going to learn about them. I'm not necessarily going to be negative towards you or be harmful or have harmful behaviors towards you because you're different, right? So it's about really accepting those differences and embracing those differences. And really and truly just knowing that we're all human. And just because someone has a different skin color or a different hair texture or speaks a different religion, or sorry, has a different religion or speaks a different language, doesn't mean that they're different from you. Those things are different, but we're all still human at the core, right? And I think it's all about framing our language and always bringing it back to we're all human beings. So don't be scared to engage in these difficult conversations. Kids know and absorb a lot more than we think. And we really need to give them credit for that because their awareness and understanding of these issues, they're totally capable of engaging and having the conversations. And it's even better when they're younger because they're not like jaded by society yet. They haven't really experienced a lot of things to kind of make them jaded. So it's really great that we can kind of encourage these conversations at a young age, by having those diverse toys, having those diverse programs for them to kind of watch, and reading diverse books and stories, and really just saying that, hey, yes, we can definitely talk about those differences, but at the end of the day, we're all the same. So that's how we really want to foster that ethnocultural lens in our kids. So I think, the parents on board today, so 6 months and 3.5, right? So I did find a great video that I think would be appropriate for, I'm trying to think, 3.5. This video is about discrimination, and I really like this YouTube channel because he really kind of breaks down a lot of terms in a really easy way. So I just want to play it because it's an example of, again, like when your kids are on YouTube or whatnot, maybe 3.5 is a little bit young, but 4, 5, 6, as they get a little bit older. It's a really awesome way of how he has broken down the word discrimination. So I just want to play this and then we could chat about it after.
A super long word, but it's really important that you understand. We're going to be talking about discrimination. Yeah, that's a super long word, but it's really important that you understand what it means.
What does it mean?
Well, discrimination is the unfair treatment of one person or a group of people based on their characteristics.
Like what?
Like age, race, religion, gender, who that person might be attracted to, disability, and there are more actually.
Uh-huh.
You get it?
Not really.
Oh. Well, let me try and explain. Let's say, Pop, you were waiting for a bus with some other people, and when the bus arrives, the driver lets everyone on except you.
What? Why?
You see, this bus driver, he just doesn't like the colour blue, so he doesn't let you on the bus.
But that's not fair.
No, that's not fair, and that is discrimination. The bus driver is discriminating against you because you are blue. Okay, another example. Imagine you had a job interview.
Sure.
Yeah, but before you can even get your hopes up, the boss turned you down.
Why?
Well, Pop, you believe in the tooth fairy. And this boss, well, she doesn't. She believes in the Easter Bunny. And for that reason, and that reason alone, she decides not to even consider you for the job.
Oh.
Again, that is discrimination. She is discriminating against you because of your beliefs. Okay, final example. Imagine one day you wanted some ice cream.
Yeah.
But this man won't sell you any.
What?
Simply because you, Pop, are round. And he thinks that balloons should be square. So he won't serve you. Yeah, doesn't seem fair, does it? You see, him refusing to serve you just because of who you are is discrimination. And it's not nice, is it?
No, it was horrible.
It kind of feels like they were all judging you based on your characteristics.
Yeah, they were prejudging me.
Yeah, they were prejudging you by what they thought they knew about you. They were being prejudiced. Hey, but as horrible as that was, Pop, there is some positive news. Acts of discrimination in the United Kingdom of Great Britain are illegal.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good thing that we have a law here in Britain so that everyone is treated fairly, but wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to have a law? I mean, if everyone was just treated fairly anyway, without it having to be enforced. Anyway, I know you guys know all about equality and how important it is that everyone is treated fairly. But sadly, across the world, this isn't always the case. There are lots of people in other countries who are discriminated against on a daily basis for whatever reasons. And what's really sad is that they're not being helped by the people who should be helping them.
What can we do?
You know, Pop, I'm not entirely sure, but I do know that we need to keep setting a good example and show the rest of the world how important it is that we do not discriminate. And if you're watching this video from a place that maybe doesn't have any anti-discrimination laws, or if you feel like you're being treated unfairly based on any of your characteristics, then please always remember that we are all worth the exact same. And nothing anyone says or does will ever change that. We are all equal.
Every one of us.
Okay, so I kind of just wanted to bring it back to the group for a second. I feel like I've been talking quite a bit. And I kind of wanted to get a sense of where we're at in the room. So it's Nicole and Lisa, correct? That are participating today. Do you guys have any questions about what I've talked about so far? I kind of wanted to open the floor for some dialogue. Okay, thank you. So you like the video? So feel free to check out Pop and Ollie's YouTube channel. He is really awesome at his videos. And he really kind of breaks it down in a way where it's really easy for kids and younger minds to absorb. And then that's kind of like a great segue to kind of open up dialogue with your kids around that terminology. It's really interesting because I find that the younger generation now, they're really on point with their language when it comes to just diverse terms. And it's funny because when I do these workshops with older adults and whatnot, I find that some words they're not really clear on what they mean. So it's really great that we can kind of expose our kids to this language at an earlier age. Yeah. So any other comments or questions so far?
Did you say that the video would be more geared toward like older children? Because I know watching it, I don't think it would be quite so good for my 3.5-year-old, but
Yeah.
She's almost there.
Yeah, 6 and up, I think is.
Yeah.
Um,
okay. Do you have any resources that would be geared a little bit younger?
So what I would recommend for a 3.5-year-old is just honestly like books and toys. So really having a diverse toy selection and book selection would be really awesome. And then like talking about those differences in the books, right?
Yeah, I thought that was great how you mentioned like, yeah, they have different hats, but they're the same in this way, or yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And then so when we talk about skin color, then it pretty much reels into the same thing. So yes, this doll has darker skin and this one has lighter skin, but they're still, I don't know, like the color pink or something, right? So we're not attributing differences to something negative. We're attributing differences to something good, and there's always something that we can relate on amongst those differences. So really encouraging that through play and toys and books at 3.5 is really good. Any other questions or comments?
I guess would it be best to use like dolls for that kind of thing? I have tons of toys, so just best to use dolls and like, I don't know, animals or something like that, as opposed to balls or blocks or, you know.
For sure. So dolls are great. Do they still make those like Little Tykes toys? I remember like Little Tykes does a really great job of making different racialized people. You know, the little egg-shaped people. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I have a trillion hand-me-down things, so I would have some of those. Yeah.
Yeah. And those come in different shades and colors, right? So it's awesome to use those as you're playing to kind of point out the differences and the similarities between those toys. But dolls would be great too. The Barbies, I don't know, what are little girls playing with these days? There's those LOL dolls, I think. Those come in like different shades too. Does your daughter, is it 3.5-year-old daughter that you have?
Yeah.
Does she like those LOL dolls?
If they came into the house, yeah, she probably would.
And yeah, even like what's it called? The little unicorn toys and different things that have different colors, right? Like just kind of points out differences. but then the similarities. And then so when she gets older and she's looking at different Barbies, like having a diverse selection of Barbies. And, you know, so she's exposed to differences really young, and they're not thinking differences are a bad thing. They know that they can relate to someone that, even though they're different than they are, right?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Lisa, did you have any comments or questions? I know you said you had was it a 6-year-old son and a 12-year-old son?
6-year-old daughter and 12-year-old son.
6-year-old daughter and 12-year-old son. Okay, awesome. So have you had any discussions with your kids or anything kind of pop up with your kids?
Not really, just, you know, knowing that my daughter, like, she'll point out differences, and I haven't really capitalized on those opportunities enough, I feel.
Okay. Okay, awesome. And do you have any questions about how to kind of start or encourage dialogue or anything like that?
I don't think so. I think just, you know, acknowledging that, yeah, people are different and we're all people, and that's okay.
Awesome. Okay, cool. And you have a 12-year-old son, right?
Yeah.
Is your son on TikTok or any of those social apps?
No, he is not on that. He has admitted to having a bit of a YouTube addiction, so YouTube is no longer on his iPad.
Oh, yeah. He's gone down the YouTube rabbit hole, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right. Are there any other questions before I jump into the next video?
Not for me.
Okay, awesome. Okay. Nope, just one sec. I lost my screen. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this little clip is a great video back from 2015. Anderson and Cooper did a little study with kids and just kind of talking about race. So I just wanted you guys to watch this, and then we'll chat about it after as well.
We're continuing our 360 special report, Kids on Race, The Hidden Picture. Its aim is to study children's attitudes on race and understand how and why they form their opinions. We teamed up with renowned child psychologist Dr. Melanie Killen to try to design this study. Now take a look at this. Killen and her team showed 13-year-old children this picture and asked them to describe what was happening. Questions like, what's happening here? Are these children friends? And would their parents want them to be friends? Now, the picture is designed to be ambiguous. What's happening is in the eye of the beholder. Then they showed them this picture and asked the same questions. Now, the only difference between the two pictures, the race of the kids was flipped. Both white and African American children were tested, and the psychologist showed a similar set of pictures to 6-year-olds. At our request, they also asked kids open-ended questions about race to understand how it plays into their own lives. And as you'll see, the responses were raw. Some of the experiences they described were shocking. In our first report, we told you that when testing 6-year-olds, the research showed an overwhelming majority of white kids were negative about interracial friendships. The majority of Black children, on the other hand, were positive. But we discovered a lot changes from childhood to adolescence. Take a look. The study found when 6-year-old African American children were asked about interracial friendships, the majority responded like this.
Carrie was trying to help her.
And how much would they like it if the two were friends?
Really?
But watch how they respond by age 13.
Carrie, she's a bully, so she pushed Abby.
Do you think that Chris and Alex are friends?
No, not really.
The optimism we heard from young Black children fades with age. At age 6, 59% of Black children think the two kids in the picture are friends. By 13, a total flip. 63% do not think they're friends, which matches white teens' attitudes. Our expert says experiences like 13-year-old Jimmy's of rejection begin to explain the disappointing trend. He says a white friend's mom forbade her son to be friends with him.
They end up to say because you're Black, so you can hang out. Her and her son.
So she kind of very openly said that the reason why her son could not hang out with You and your family was because you guys are black.
Yep.
Because of your skin. Or
Dante was bullied so badly because of his race, he had to change schools.
I've been bullied for like the way I look and the way of my skin at my previous school that I went to. And they just kept on bullying me. And I didn't like it. I just asked them to stop like over and over again. And then I tried not to break. But I couldn't hold on anymore. So I asked my mom, can I leave?
Peer interactions are a way to
Our
understand.
expert, Dr. Killen, says the decline happens because they've been given a sobering reality check on race.
They're getting a lot of negative feedback through elementary school and adolescence. And I think if you have that kind of experience and you have it repeatedly over a number of years, your optimism is going to decline because you've been told, you really don't belong here. You're really not part of us.
Dr. Killen also says anxiety about interracial dating from both black and white parents can have a profound effect on how their kids view friendships.
Parents of young children do often send messages about we can all be friends with everybody. They do send the positive messages. But by adolescence, they start getting more nervous about this. And they start thinking, well, you should be friends with people like you or like us. How are you? I'm Soledad.
Soledad O'Brien asked some kids about the issue after it came up during their tests.
Do you think your parents would be fine if you decided to start dating a black girl, brought her home?
Honestly, my parents probably wouldn't be too happy because if I was to marry a black girl, you're connected to their family now, and who knows what her family is really like.
So they probably wouldn't be that excited about it.
Probably not.
Shantae admitted anxiety and a double standard for interracial dating in her family.
If I were to date a white guy, a lot of people wouldn't really have a problem with that. But if my brother were to bring home a white girl, there's definitely going to be some controversy.
From whom? Your parents or you?
From me. from me. Really, because I think it's more of a problem for people when a black man brings home a white woman because it's been like that for years.
So it would matter to you?
I think it would, unless, of course, she were not to act, I guess, so quote unquote white.
What does that mean?
Flip my hair, I'm fine, ha 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 ha, that's so ghetto. No. No.
There was some good news in our results as well. The racial balance of a school can make a major positive difference on how white kids view race. The study tested kids from majority white, majority black, and racially mixed schools. The difference was remarkable. Students in majority white schools were the most pessimistic about race. Only 47% think their parents would approve of kids from different races being friends. In racially diverse and majority black schools, 71% are positive about it. The reason, according to Dr. Killen, is friendships.
There's almost nothing as powerful as having a friend of a different racial ethnic background to reduce prejudice. You have that experience that enables you to challenge stereotypes. So you feel like you're...
Samantha attends a majority black middle school.
My grandparents have a lot of, they're very racist against African Americans and other races, but it's 2012, so they have to push that aside, and they'll be like, no, that's wrong to be, you want to stick with your own race. And I'm like, no, I'm friends with everyone.
Anderson Cooper, CNN.
Okay, so I wanted to chat about that video a little bit. What are your thoughts after watching the study with Anderson Cooper? And the 6-year-old is looking at that image at 6 and then again at 13. Any thoughts around that? Has anyone seen this clip before?
I've never seen it. It made my heart break just seeing how pure and innocent they are when they're younger, and then what the kids are going through, their life experiences, and how jaded they end up becoming because of it. It's just so heartbreaking, and just very sad to see that.
Thanks for sharing, Nicole. And this is why it's so important to have like workshops like this with parents, because I think that a lot of us think that if we just kind of don't talk about it with kids and that we're shielding them from it. But in reality, their lived experience from very young, what they're exposed to, conversations they're having at school and whatnot, exposes them to all of this. And you're right, like kids are so innocent and pure at age 6, right? So their view of the world and what's happened to them is still very innocent, right? So that's why it's so important at the young ages to kind of have that dialogue and encourage, us to, talk about differences. Let's embrace differences and talk about those things at a young age. So we carry that with us into our older life, right? Because unfortunately, yes, kids get jaded very quickly because of bullying, because of so-and-so's family. And I have one last video to show you guys, but I know these 2 examples are, well, actually all of the videos, actually none of them are really based in Canada. But I think it's really important to acknowledge the fact that I picked these videos because this is no different from our experiences as racialized people in Canada, and especially doing this work for years, talking to various youth in school systems and after school programs, and being born and raised in Canada myself. Like this is true for Canada itself, because I've experienced this in the school system, education system here in Canada. My son has experienced this in the education system here in Canada. My son has been told from peers that he can't be their friend because he's Black. Like this stuff happens in Canada too. So I do want to acknowledge that as well, because a lot of times people say, well, that's the States and we're better in Canada, but really it's no different. So Lisa, you wrote, so much unconscious bias gets perpetuated into larger conscious societal bias. Yes, exactly. And it's unfortunate. How many of you have seen that doll test, the video about the doll test, where multiracial kids are put in front of one Black doll and one white doll, and they're given a series of questions, and they ask, like, which doll do you think is good? Which doll do you think is bad? Which doll do you think is nice? Which one do you think is friendly? Have any of you seen that video?
I actually saw that, Carissa, and was shocked how brutally honest these little kids were and how ingrained what they thought was. And I'm like, you're too little to think that way. Where's that coming from? And I think that was a huge eye opener for me.
Yeah, I also saw that one, and same thing, like it was really sad to see children of color like identifying themselves, like the doll that looked like them, as bad or ugly or all these things. And it really shows how that's been ingrained, and that's their self-image, and it was really heartbreaking.
Yeah, I'll send that in the links of resources as well. But to Lisa's question, yes, around unconscious bias and how it gets brought into larger society, all of these messages are being shown to our kids all the time, and we don't even recognize it. That's why I shared that story about, my experience growing up, in a mainly predominantly white suburban community, and feeling really othered and feeling really different and not feeling, pretty or whatever, because of what was around me. But I had multiracial friends and whatnot. And then so now when I raised my son and we're in this extremely diverse community, I was really shocked that he was still experiencing some of the things that I experienced growing up, despite the fact that he was in this, multi-ethnic, multiracial, multi-religion like community, right? And it really was, again, when we look at what our kids are watching, the books that they have available to them and those programs, again, if our kids aren't seeing their likeness in their superheroes, then that's invalidating, because we have to think about it. In a kid's mind, what are your role models? What are you looking up to? And at that particular point in my son's life, like Batman and Superman and Spider-Man were his idols. So if he's not seeing himself resembled in these people that he thinks are like gods, essentially, and he's imitating every single day when he runs around the house, that's going to do something to his self-esteem, right? And I don't think we realize how much these things, how much kids pick these things up. And that's why Black Panther was such a huge thing for the Black community, right? It's like our first Black Marvel superhero. So yeah, thank you for your comments and feedback. I really appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to go into one last video, and then I'll open up the floor for a broader discussion.
American father, and I'm from Haiti and Nigeria. Like 3 things, like I'm Dominican, Puerto Rican, and Black. I'm biracial. I have an African American father and an Irish American mom. My name's Lamine. I'm Muslim. I'm Indian, British, Scottish, and American. My parents are from Venezuela, and I was sharing like one of the foods that we eat, and then I got made fun of. They were like, "What is that? Ew! Oh, ew! What is that?" And like I cried because I felt like, oh, there's something wrong where I'm from. Like maybe like it's bad. Like I'm different. I am an African American adopted girl, only child, and I live with my 2 dads. I remember when I was younger, I went with my family to a restaurant, and they made us pay in advance just in case we like didn't pay afterwards, and that was kind of upsetting. You start to notice that people are different, and you have comments. They might be racist or they might not be, but by the time you get older, you know that it is racist and you should stop. I feel a little scared about if I, just walk down the street, cops might just think I'm doing something bad, and then if I'm trying to explain to them, they won't listen, and then just start beating me up and doing terrible things to me. I think there's like this anxiety that kind of comes with being biracial, like that kind of eats away at you, like almost like you have to prove yourself, like that you're one or the other. Like, for example, like I hear the phrase, "You're not Black," all the time. People sometimes think that I'm supposed to like talk ghetto or like whatever that is. Oh, she's uneducated because she's African American. Because I'm Hispanic or Latino, I can't have like a lot of money. Just this weekend, I went with my friend to Urban Outfitters and we were shopping, and I really wanted to try on this dress. And then this lady that was just like there, she's kind of like watching me and just like, I'm not going to steal it or anything. I think white privilege is the idea that in your everyday life you're getting treated differently and sometimes with more respect, or people just trust you more, or they have certain expectations of you, like you might be smarter or you might be wealthier. Because you're white, it makes me feel guilty sometimes, even though it's not my fault. Like I feel guilty for having a privilege that like I don't deserve. If I was ever like the mayor or something that controls the policeman, I would want to go out and look in the neighborhoods where there are people that's very friendly, so you can pick them instead of like these guys that's just doing all this training. It's better to pick people that's more minded with the community than to just pick some new guy and get on the street. Like it's just not gonna work out. We have like these kids from they're Ecuadorian and they get made fun of because they look Mexican, and they get told on a daily basis, "Oh, you like tacos? Oh, you like churros? How come I saw your mom on the corner selling ices?" Like it's like I feel bad for them personally because I'm like, wow, like they're not, and like even though they tell them I'm not Mexican, I'm Ecuadorian, they still get teased.
Okay, so I just wanted to talk about that for a little bit. Any thoughts or feedback on this video? So those are all 12-year-old children.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for sharing that. I've appreciated all the material you've been sharing. And one of the things that resonated with me in there was the one little guy who he said something about feeling like you have to prove yourself, and that piece of identity challenge. And yeah, that just really struck me.
Thank you for sharing. I think one of the things that I really love about this video is that how articulate these kids are about the issues that are happening around racism and discrimination. And that one little guy that was saying that, yes, that the people might say things that are racist or not racist, or they're not sure, but at this point we know it's wrong. And for a 12-year-old to be able to articulate themselves with that, I think is just so eye-opening, which further communicates to everyone that, hey, we need to be having these conversations with our kids throughout their entire development, because they're, again, by 8, 9, 10, our kids know that discrimination happens, that racism happens, but they may not have the language to say, hey, that was discriminatory, or hey, that was racist. But they do know that they're being treated differently than their peers. And this stuff chips away at their self-esteem and self-confidence and self-worth very, very early, and definitely affects how they're going to carry themselves into adulthood. So I thought that was really, really key about that video as well. Any other comments or questions?
You can really see how these kids are being shaped at such a young age, and how, you know, how they're going to act as they get older, and just like in fear for some of them, like saying, oh, I don't know if a police officer pulls me over, are they just going to beat me up? I'm trying really hard, you know, to not do anything wrong because I'm so worried about that kind of stuff. It's terrible.
Yes, thanks for sharing. And to be honest with you, that is a lived experience, being a Black person and a Black Canadian. Again, like I shared that my son is 14. I would be lying to you if I didn't say that I get scared when he's outside on his own. I live in fear that something will happen to my son on a regular basis. And it's actually awful, because my kid's becoming a man. Soon he's going to be seen as a threat to society. We have to be having conversations on a regular basis with him about how to handle himself if he is in front of a police officer. You know what I mean? And like, but this is how we've always lived. This is how I grew up. These are the conversations my mom and dad had with me, and had with my brother. Like, it's just a generational thing where we know that we have to protect our children in a certain type of way, because they are seen as threats when they go outside. And that's our reality, unfortunately. And again, Canadian, right? This is a Canadian context with my lived experience. So yes, I think, and my son's definitely suffered from a lot of trauma around news headlines and articles with the Black Lives Matter movement, because that movement started in 2012, right? So it didn't start with George Floyd. Like, there are multiple deaths prior to George Floyd that had media attention, but didn't go anywhere to the point where George Floyd's was publicized internationally, and that's why it had the attention that it did, because that was all in video. But the movement started in 2012, so we've been continually traumatized on an ongoing basis about Black folks dying at the hands of police brutality. So it's conversations that we have to have with our kids on a regular basis. So to hear that from a youth saying, yeah, I'm scared, like, and he should be, because again, it's the reality, right? Did you guys see the video that popped up? I think, was it like 2 weeks ago? It was a Calgary police officer that arrested a Black child, 12-year-old actually, in Ogden. And it was recorded on video. The officer essentially was on the ground, handcuffed him, and then later said that they made a mistake because the kids are innocent. But essentially, they arrested or handcuffed these two boys and interrogated them in a public park because they thought they fit the description of someone who stole from a convenience store. But the kids had the receipts on them, so they admitted their fault, that they are wrongfully arrested the wrong kids. Did you guys see that video? Did anyone see that video?
No, I didn't see it.
Yeah, it was about a week and a half ago, I think. Yeah, a week and a half ago. It was posted on 660 News, and it made its social media rounds. So yeah, it's a very real reality, unfortunately, for as a Black parent and having Black kids. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. I kind of just want to open up the floor to any questions or comments, or kind of just get a sense of where you're at. And yeah, so feel free to send in the text box any questions or unmute, and we can just have a conversation. So
if it's okay, I will stop the recording now, and then if anybody wants to ask.